Okay, kids, it's time that we're going to do our rosettes. And first thing you want to do is get your materials that you like for your rosette. In this case, I'm showing you what's going to be the Slope Shoulder J45. And I've got some abalone here. And you buy that's going to be pre-curved. And you're going to use that if you're going to do abalone. You don't want to try and curve this stuff yourself. It's hard to do to get your thicknesses right. So buy your curved abalone. You also, these pieces are too long for the actual curve. They get broken, and quite honestly, that's one way you can tell if it's real abalone, if you see the little break marks in the abalone. A lot of the fake stuff, which is plastic, you don't see any break lines in it. It's all one piece, so you know that's not real stuff. You want to see the break lines where you have to fit this stuff to make your rosette inlay around the rosette. So that's one example. I think I'm going to put a little blue on the inside and outside of that abalone. This has a blue strip in the back strip, so that'll tie the blue into the back strip. Here's a couple more ideas. This is some tortoiseshell, some plastic celluloid tortoiseshell, and I might put a piece of white with that. I'll have to see when I get there. This is some red on this three-piece pine top, some red and some cream-colored binding. That'll be kind of pretty, I think. And on the fourth one, I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. Probably some more of this tortoiseshell. I've got some thinner stuff I think I'm going to use, again, with maybe a cream in the middle or something. So I'll see how that goes. So, lay out your ideas for what you want for your rosette. You can make rosettes out of things. I've made them out of tree bark before. If you've got something laying around the house, maybe that has some sentimental value that you could cut up. I've cut up dominoes before for rosettes. One thing I did that I really liked, here we go. Look at this. This was a purse handle that I found at Jo-Ann Fabrics. Now that's not the right size for the rosette, but it was this, yummy kind of plastic that was all tortoiseshell-ish and see-through-ish, so it's really pretty. Now, again, I had to cut this down and cut it into the rounds that I wanted, but I've made a couple guitars with rosettes out of this sort of thing. Worked out great. So again, find things, look around, find things. Go to the bead store. Go to the, again, Jo-Ann Fabrics, those hobby shops, that sort of thing. They always have plastic stuff laying around, some of which is really pretty that can be cut up and used as a rosette. Again, I like to be whimsical. I like to find things that aren't common. It's kind of boring just to buy the stuff you can get through StuMac or LMI. So again, this was the Jo-Ann Fabric stuff. Purse handles, very cool. These are pre-made rosettes. This is, I think, Koa. Here's one. I've got several of these that are the herringbone. There's a different herringbone, and another one. I think those two are the same. You can buy these pre-made, and they're fine. Again, I like to make up my own, figure out something odd to use there. One thing, if you do buy the pre-mades, you have to be careful about the routing for those. They have a little bit flexibility because they're opened at one end, and so you can scrunch those into a little tighter or a little wider routing. This sort of thing that's one size, you really have to route it exactly this size. Or you try and open it up at one point and then give it a little bit flexibility. I'm not a fan of these plain wooden ones, but again, that's just me. That's just an aesthetic issue. And these I'm not big fans of because you see them all the time. Alrighty, here's my basic setup for routing my rosettes. This is just a board, and I bought the StuMac the circle cutting base that goes on my Dremel tool with the StewMac router base on that. And this is a very slick, very well worth purchasing piece of equipment. This sits on the pin and it spins with the Dremel tool here and cuts your slot for your rosette. You adjust the depth, obviously, and then you can adjust the how far out the rosette goes and so forth. So this tool's worth its weight. I highly recommend it. Again, I don't ever make two guitars the same, so I haven't made a rosette cutter that's a standard rosette cutter. It's not my thing. I'm not interested in doing the same thing over and over again. So with this, I can always get the radius I want and the thickness of my slot. So I'm gonna now mount that on there, and I'll be right back here and we'll look at that. Okay, I don't know if you can quite see any of this, but this is my notebook I keep with various and sundry notes about different guitars. If I get something in and I like it, not only do I trace the pattern, but then I keep all my notes about the scale length and where the sound hole rests and so on and so forth. So this is my J45, and it says my slope shoulder says the sound hole is 3 3/4 of an inch down, and it's 3 7/8 inch opening, and that's off of a 50s J45 Gibson. So I'm going to transfer this information onto the top. Obviously, I'm going to start where my line was from my mold and come down to where the top of my sound hole is going to start, which is going to be 3 3/4 inches, about right there. So let me do that. I'm going to lay that out, and then we'll talk some more here in a second. Okay, so I'm going to find out what the size of my drill bit needs to be to match the pin that goes with my router base, and I already figured that out, and it's the 3/16 inch bit. And I'm going to take that. Here's my hole. This is my hole, not my rosette, but my hole, and that's 3 3/4 inch down from the top of the guitar, and it's 3 7/8 inch opening for the hole. And I've got my center point marked. I'm going to take my brad point drill bits and put that hole, that will set over this pin when I'm routing. So I'm going to drill that hole now off camera, and then we'll show the setup. This is the abalone I'm going to be using. This is actually Ablam, so it's a laminated. You see the black on the back, and but it's real abalone. It's just a laminated piece that you can buy. So anyway, when I measure this, it's right at 1/8 of an inch. There we go. So when I measure that, it's right at 1/8 of an inch, and I've got burrs. Now this is a burr that that cuts your channel. That's right at 1/8 of an inch. So I can set this up and cut a single channel, and that'll fit everything. Sometimes when you have some odd sized width that you need for your rosette, you take a smaller burr than what you want, and then when you put it into your router base, you can adjust that so that it goes in and out. And so you make one pass with the smaller bit, and then you adjust this to the other side of your line and cut your next piece. So it might take 2 passes or even 3 to get the width that you want. But in this case, I am going to be using an 1/8 inch burr because this seems to measure right to 1/8 of an inch, and I'll be able to make one pass and be done. So I'm going to get that set up and we'll get right back to you here. Okay, so here's my distance. I always look at this and see what kind of looks right to me. A quarter of an inch looks pretty good, so I'm gonna mark that as a quarter of an inch, and that's where my routes, my groove is going to be at. So I'll have a quarter of an inch in from the top of my sound, the edge of what will be the sound hole. In other words, this all gets lost, but this then will go to there to be a quarter inch, and that will start my abalone then into there, like so. Now, again, this sits on the pin. So now I'm gonna, with this adjuster, I can adjust my in and out. So that's, I'm gonna put right to my mark here. That's the quarter of an inch. Set that. Now, the first pass is going to be right here at the above the sound hole. And we're going to do all of our checking there. The reason you do all your checking at this point is that when your fingerboard comes down here, it will hide this area. So if your width isn't right, or your depth isn't right, or your spacing, and you want to readjust it, then you know that you can do that because it'll get hidden with your fingerboard. Now, sometimes I like to not hide that with my fingerboard, so I will route that knowing what I've got, and when I'll come around, I'll match those ends as best I can, and that looks really cool when you don't have the fingerboard over the rosette. But you often see it over the rosette. Most Martins and a lot of guitars, all that stuff comes under there, and they don't worry about matching it because it's hidden. In other words, don't worry about making the ends flush with each other in there. So there's my first look at that. And then I've got my depth set, I've got my spacing, I know where I'm at. Now I'm gonna run a bit. So I'm just going to do that much. Then I'm going to take my rosette material and see how I did as far as my thickness here. So another way to do that is snip off a bit of this. You know, I don't need quite this much, so I can cut a couple little pieces off of those and use those to look at what I've got here. And quite honestly, I don't like this. It's a little too sloppy, so I'm going to go to a smaller bit and then make a couple passes. So let me reset this up. By the way, a good way also to check your depth for your material is just put your material up against, there's my abalone, and I'm going to put it right there and feel that to see how my depth is. That feels real good right there. This is harder to sand. The abalone is harder to sand than the mahogany. So if the abalone is just a hair below this surface, it's easier to take the wood down to the abalone than to take the abalone down to the wood. So, and often with a softer wood like this, certainly with the spruces, if you sand this, you're going to get a little bit of a wrinkle on each side of it because you're going to sand this away, and this is not going to go so easily. Now, a good way I often will do that is I'll take a belt sander, which will sand everything really flat across here. So when I'm sanding this down, I'll put my belt sander on it. Your random orbiter, your palm sanders, that sort of thing is going to be a little less effective and can cause a little bit of a hump there. So just remember, your abalone's going to sand harder than most any other surface you use on your top. So be aware of that, cognizant of that. So now I'm going to do another small sample, still within where my fingerboard would lie. So that's going to be good. I like my depth there. And so I'm going to come back and I'm going to go ahead and make my first pass, and then I'll come back and open that up just a hair more so that I've got my second pass, and that's going to give me my width with my 2 pieces of blue in that. So I'm going to go ahead and route this first piece here, and I'll leave the video on. Okay, this is, I don't know if you can see this, but there's my 2 blue strips and my abalone. It fits really nice and snug. So I'm very happy with that. So now I'm going to go ahead and I've set that, changed that depth. So now I'm going to go ahead and route the rest of this for my width. And I like my depth as well. So I've got my width now readjusted here so that that gives me that extra bit. Got a bit of fuzz all around this, so now I'm going to come back and work. I don't want to round these edges. I'm just getting rid of the fuzziness off of that. So there we go, and then that's going to fit in there, and we'll have a blue piece there, and we'll have a blue piece on the inside of that. Actually, the problem is that this is going to be all right, but I have to now break these pieces because this curve's a little bit bigger than the curve here. And again, as I said before, you want to actually see these things broken. So at this point, I would take my needle nose, and I'm going to break them into pieces about like so. And you just break it. Now, the next thing I do, okay, I'm going to go over to my disc sander, and I'm going to just touch it. Okay, so I took a little bit off of that edge to match this one, and that looks good. Again, those joints don't have to be close. I mean, they just have to be close. They don't need to be perfect. You're going to fill this all with super glue and make all of those edges look really good. So in this case, those two look fine there. So my next piece, again, let me break this into about thirds. About like that. So again, I'm just going to go through these one at a time. That looks pretty good there. this one, that's not bad. I can live with that. And this piece is going to come in here. That's alright, except for when I broke this, there's a little lip on this guy. So I'm just going to take that over here and sand him off. Okay, so that goes there. This guy's going to go here. So I'm just checking all my joints. Everything looks good. I'll get my next piece. We still going. And I'm going to continue around till I get those all fitted. Okay, kids, so I've got my pieces started here, and you can see I've got some tape holding this remaining stuff, and then I've got my abalone pieces lined up, and I'm going to start fitting those in there. Keep a little screwdriver nearby, because then you're going to use that to push your abalone down into the slot, and you want to make sure it gets pushed clear down and push tight against the next piece. Okay, once you get everything positioned, these first couple started here, then you're going to take your super glue and buy these little tubes. Don't buy the big tubes. It goes bad sitting around. I use this stuff every day and the big tubes still go bad. So buy the little tubes. By the way, guess where I get these at? I get them at the dollar store. Guess how much they cost? $1 for a package of 4 or 5 or whatever it is. And it's all the same, the cyanoacrylic stuff. So you're going to take your super glue and you're going to run it, and this is the runny stuff is what you want. So it runs clear down into, it'll run under the abalone. You're going to put it on both sides of your color, both on the outside and on the inside here. Believe me, I've done this before where I thought I had my color down in there, and then when I sanded it, I sanded through my color because I didn't have it sitting down in there deep enough. But once you get started like this, once this hardens, which it's there, it's pretty much there now. Now you can continue with your work. Now that I spritz that and I make sure everything's down and where I want it. You may know about Accelerator, Stumac, lots of places you can get it. And you could just spritz this, just a light. That helps set that. When you can't wait for your super glue to dry, you get out the Accelerator. In this rush-a-day world that we live in. So there we go. Now that's starting to set up. So now I'm ready for my next piece. Make sure that goes down in there. Put a little super glue on it. I don't want to go close to this end yet because I'll do that when I get the next piece set. In other words, I don't want get a puddle of super glue where I need underneath where I need to hammer some of this back down. So next piece. There we go. Nice. Make sure all of that's good there. And that's looking nice. Put a little super glue on my edges to set that. Okay, so there's the rosette in. And next thing I'm going to do is sand that off with my belt sander. So let me get set up for that. There you can see more of the whole guitar. There it is. Looks good. I still need to do some sanding on that, but that's it at first blush. So now we're going to come back and cut out the sound hole. Don't cut out your sound hole until you have this sanded flat. That's the voice of experience. You can grab, if you tried sanding this, once you're certainly with the belt sander, it can grab and the belt can get stuck in there and so on. So sand that down smooth and then come back, and now we're going to mount this back on our circle cutter with our Dremel tool, and then we're going to come in and cut that at our prescribed diameter. Okay, now I've got my cutter reset for my 1 3/4 inches down to the sound hole. So now this is going to cut that inside of the sound hole. So, and I'll do this, I won't try and do this in one pass. I'll do 2 or 3 passes for depth. I don't care about the thickness of my bit at this point. It's just going to cut out a hole. So here we go. Okay, so that's my first pass, and so now I'm going to set my depth down lower and take a second cut, and then maybe I'll do a third. I don't want to try and go through all at once. By the way, on your last pass, once you know you're going to go through, you want to clamp this. And this is the voice of experience, because once it gives, your machine's stable to this pin, but the rest of this can move and you'll get a mistake. So when you're ready to go through for the last time, clamp your work down at that point. So I'm going to lower this now, and I'll check it against my thickness here, see how that feels. Boy, it's really close, so I'll make this pass and we'll be about where we want to be. So I'm not quite through, so I'm going to do one more pass and then we'll have it. Oh, there we go. So there's your rosette and your hole, just like that. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy if you've got the right tools. And I highly recommend that that setup with the Dremel. It's so you can change your variations on everything, and just do any rosette you want to do. So there you go.
Bruise on my hands in the shape of Japan.
Okay, kids, if you like and use or find these videos interesting, educational, informative, or maybe just entertaining because you're up late at night, we'd love to have you support us. There's a few ways you can do that. One is click the subscribe button below. That helps YouTube know what we're doing and that we're serious about this. Also, you can hit that bell icon, which tells you when the next videos are coming out. We're going to try and get at least one out a week now that we're up and running here. Also, a good way to support us is become a patron over at our Patreon account. And again, there's a link below for that. Patreon's a cool way that you can sign up and give, $5 a month or $10 or whatever you feel is worth it. If you're using these videos to actually build a guitar and find it interesting and fun, please support us through Patreon. That's I wish I could do this completely for free, but it takes money and time away from my other regular job. So it's a big undertaking, and any support you could send this way is great. It's all been very fun so far for me, and I hope you guys are having fun at this as well, and we greatly appreciate all your support, so thanks.